Discover the incredible secret that transformed a millionaire widower's twins' sleepless nights. Mark Jensen stared blankly at the wall, the echo of silence in his picturesque Maplewood home almost deafening. It was an illusion, this life he'd created, a millionaire mogul with everything he could want, yet his heart felt hollow. Two small faces, once radiant with joy from their mother's bedtime stories, now carried the weight of loss. Emma and Lily had become monsters of torment, their sleepless nights filled with clinging shadows of a mother they'd tragically lost too soon. The warm embrace of memories was starkly replaced by an aching absence. What could a busy man like him offer those delicate souls when he struggled to peel back his own grief? The relentless grind of selling properties was a harsh distraction from the mess of his existence. Yet as he rushed from meeting to meeting, he felt himself unravel. Moments spent with his daughters were marred by his phone buzzing, the unrelenting demands of a cutthroat industry that dismissed vulnerability. Weren't they supposed to be his priority? But the urgency of closing deals pushed the thought away, filling him with guilt. One evening, seeking solace amidst the chaos, Mark discovered a dust-covered journal buried beneath an old stack of papers, a relic from his wife. As he opened it, her handwriting breathed life into the barren air, chronicling family traditions, childhood adventures, and stories of resilience. One tale struck him hard, an account of her great-grandfather, a humble farmer who had woven love and hard work into the fabric of family bonds. Mark hesitated. Should he really draw from this treasure? What if it was futile? His mind raced, wrestling with the pull between the world he had built and the values his late wife embraced. Was it feasible to weave such sentimental traditions into the fast-paced reality he lived in? What if his colleagues mocked him for taking moments off for storytelling? The thought brought a knot to his stomach. He envisioned their scoffing faces, raising eyebrows at this shift he craved. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Night after night passed, and while the girls lay awake, Mark read the stories. Each tale of hardship and warmth felt like stepping closer to his wife's spirit, but every day he arrived at work, the pressure mounted. His firm collapsed in disbelief about his newfound commitment to family. Their ambition clashed with his heart's direction. A career-shaped life he was once proud of felt like a cage. As the tension built, Mark found himself standing at a crossroads. During a critical board meeting, murmurs echoed like a storm brewing. The ultimatum hung in the air: choose career progression or embrace this new path with the girls. And just as the weight of it all threatened to crush him, a surge of defiance bubbled within. Would he speak out about his journey, the lessons learned, the love shared? Mark took a deep breath, preparing to shatter the silence, but a shadow lurked at the edge of his mind. What if they turned away, leaving him and his daughters clinging to those stories alone? The power of love and legacy now hung in the balance. The room surrounded him, and Mark struggled to articulate his truth. Would they understand? The walls closed in, and the fleeting memories of laughter and light flickered like starlight in the distance, just out of reach. His choice loomed, possibilities swirling around him, leaving him to wonder if he could ever protect his precious daughters from being swallowed by a world dismissive of the heart. Mark's gaze faltered as he weighed his decision, torn between the stale air of corporate ambition and the warm glow of family love. Each moment stretched fiercely, almost painfully. The boardroom, once a sanctuary for his ambitions, now reflected a life pivoting towards something precious, yet fragile. He felt the energy shift. his colleagues anticipating his next words, their expressions a mix of confusion and skepticism. What if he challenged their expectations? What if he bared his soul to these suits who thrived on numbers and bottom lines? As he opened his mouth, his heart raced, but his throat threatened to close in on itself. Sweat gathered at his brow. This was more than just a career crossroads. It felt like a reckoning with his own identity. "Can we take a moment?" His voice shook, disbelief coloring his thoughts. He perceived the smirks from some. This was a vulnerability they would seize on. Yet he pressed on, driving himself beyond that initial wave of fear. What if we redefined success? He had grabbed the room's attention, the rapid breaths of his colleagues filling the silence as they waited for the punchline of his absurdity. Even the thought of their laughter felt trivial compared to the weight he carried inside. But clarity emerged. A revelation ignited within him. He needed to advocate for the very essence of what made a family strong. Stories, connections born out of love, could reshape their world, just as they had done in his wife's journal. "Every night, my daughters struggle with nightmares, haunted by loss. And I realize that corporate success won't fill that void. We need to re-establish our priorities, not just for them, but for us as a team." His words tumbled out with growing confidence. What if we allowed vulnerability, real, heartfelt discussions, into our culture? It wouldn't just bring out the humanity in our work, it could improve our company ethos. The silence held firm, unconvinced but curious. Relief flooded him, emboldening his resolve, yet anxiety nipped at his heels as memories of mocking laughter intruded. What if they dismissed him entirely? "Mark," the CFO interjected, raising an eyebrow, "this isn't some family therapy session. We're focused on metrics and performance." The derision cut deeper than intended, but he used it to fuel his conviction. "I'm aware," Mark replied, grappling with a determination he hadn't known he possessed. "Yet this relentless pursuit of numbers is a hollow victory. If we ignore the heart, the core relationships and storytelling that holds us together, we risk losing everything." His colleagues exchanged glances, reading expressions that revealed a mix of reluctance and intrigue. Inside, Mark fought the urge to shrink back. What if he had it all wrong? But he clung to the vision, imagining his daughters glowing with joy, reliving the stories that had formed a legacy of warmth. "Let's shift the focus," he continued, sharpening the clarity of his voice. "Let me show you how embracing family ties can fortify our business. We can incorporate our humanity into our success, creating a brand that resonates on a personal level. Imagine the impact." The tension crackled slightly, an electric charge of daring combined with doubt. A pivotal moment unwrapped itself before him, revealing an opportunity for transformation not only in his life, but also within the confines of the business he had once considered sacrosanct. As the board hung on his words, he reflected on his path, suddenly aware of an irreversible depth stirring within him. This awakening was more than just a speech. It was about embracing fragments of vulnerability and projecting them into his life's work. Yet just as the room began to shift, sparking tentative interest, a familiar doubt haunted him. Could he really steer this company towards an emotional awakening? Would they follow him into this new frontier? The challenge sharpened, stirring a tumult of hope and fear within him. Mark inhaled deeply, preparing to tackle the next wave of resistance. And as the first hints of dialogue sparked among his colleagues, he could feel the weight of the future closing in, both exhilarating and foreboding. In this moment, the question loomed larger than before. Could he redefine success for himself, for them, and for Emma and Lily? As he braced himself for the unexpected responses, the ultimate test awaited. He would soon find out if this direction could bridge the chasm created by loss, or if he would discover something even more profound about the lengths he would go to protect his family. Mark's breath faltered as he braced himself for the consequences of his revelation. The boardroom, once merely a stage for presentations, had transformed into a crucible for his convictions. He sensed the palpable shift in energy. The air thickened with skepticism and intrigue. He had stepped onto a path he didn't fully control, one that forced him to confront the very essence of his identity, both as a professional and a father. "Are you suggesting we conduct team-building exercises inspired by family stories?" the lead marketing strategist asked, her brow furrowed in genuine confusion. "I want to explore deeper connections." "Yes," Mark replied, his voice steadier now, emboldened by the flickering interest he detected among some faces. "By sharing our experiences, we can build trust within our teams and innovate more authentically." Laughter erupted from the CFO, a dismissive scoff that crushed the delicate atmosphere. "Trust? Trust doesn't matter if the numbers don't add up." Mark gritted his teeth, the insult clinging to him like a shadow. But he reminded himself that this wasn't just about the numbers. Then what are we building? A kingdom of data or a legacy of impact? The corporate world is filled with profitable companies that crumble because there are no connections. The CFO rolled his eyes, but Mark noticed a few team members nodding, tiny sparks of recognition igniting behind their hesitation. This internal battlescape was profound. They were caught between their preconceived notions of business and a burgeoning understanding of what human connection could bring to their work. "What if we started with small changes?" Mark proposed, his mind racing to formulate actionable ideas. A storytelling session at the start of each meeting, allowing people to share their personal journeys and the challenges they've faced, no one left behind. Amidst the murmurs, a voice rose from the back, a young analyst barely out of college. "I think it's a great idea, Mark. Our clients are moving towards brands that resonate with them on a personal level. Don't we want to be that brand?" With each supportive voice, Mark's confidence soared. This was no longer just a list of demands or wishes. This blossomed into a collaborative vision. His mind sparkled with the possibility of being the catalyst for something transformative. As discussions progressed, Mark could feel inklings of a new company ethos taking root. They debated logistics, concerns, and innovative wild ideas, weaving together their experiences. The mockery that had once felt so suffocating began to fade into a rhythm of excitement. What had started as a desperate plea had morphed into a movement, and Mark reveled in his own ingenuity. His heart ached, however, recalling his daughter's faces, the sleepless nights spent battling fears that had little to do with his work. He needed to integrate his fervor for change in the boardroom with his intentions as a father at home. After the meeting ended, he lingered, tapping into the thoughts swirling around him. One brave conversation had the power to extend beyond their corporate existence. This was more than about business. It was a chance to embody the warmth of storytelling amidst the suffocating walls of responsibility. "Are you okay?" the young analyst asked, hesitantly approaching him. "I was worried when you started, but now they seem to be listening." Her observation struck him. "Maybe listening is exactly what we need more of," he admitted, surprise coloring his voice. For so long he had felt unheard, the supposition of his grief a wall between him and those around him. Could it be that voicing his concerns ultimately bridged that very gap? As he returned home, Mark sat at the edge of his bed, watching his daughters sleep peacefully for the first time in what felt like ages. He marveled at how the threads of his life were weaving together. If he could foster dialogue here, perhaps it would spark solace in their haunted nights too. But with every flicker of hope came the chilling awareness of reality. Would the corporate shift hold? Would his colleagues truly embrace this new focus, or would it wither under the weight of tradition and skepticism? Mark took a deep breath, steeling himself. He had ignited the first flame. Now he would have to nurture it against the winds of resistance. What awaited in the days ahead could transform not just a company, but his entire notion of family and legacy. He was about to discover just how far he would go to protect what he loved, and what radical sacrifices he might have to make. The next chapter of his journey loomed on the horizon. Would he find the courage to own it? The morning light peered through the curtains, bathing Mark's room in a golden hue, yet the warmth didn't extend to his chest. It only amplified the cold pang of uncertainty swirling around his ambitions and the hopes he harbored for his daughters. Every successful establishment he had created felt dwarfed by the enormity of family connection. His dual aspirations clashed, and he needed to navigate the landscape cautiously while ensuring he remained authentic. As he prepared for the day, Mark replayed the previous night's boardroom discussions in his mind. The words of the young analyst echoed like a verdant seed sprouting, encouraging him to push harder against his own limiting beliefs. What if he could truly implement something revolutionary? What if the path to transforming the company started with transforming himself? At the office, he felt an electric energy lingering. People moved with purpose, a subtle change radiating through the halls as if they had, however reluctantly, acknowledged his call for deeper authenticity. Mark decided to organize informal coffee share sessions, catering a space for employees to express their stories. He hoped these exchanges would foster a culture of open dialogue, yet lingering self-doubt gnawed at him. What if they held no interest? "Mark!" a voice snapped him from introspection. It was Sarah, the head of HR, skepticism darkening her brow. "I need to speak with you about this storytelling initiative. What if it doesn't resonate? We don't want to waste time, you know." "Why do you think it won't?" he countered, surprised at his boldness. Confronting the skepticism felt like drawing a line in the sand. "Because it's risky. We've done things a certain way for years, and change doesn't come easy, especially when profits are at stake." Her words hung in the air. They echoed his fears, but were wrapped in the coldness of caution. But Mark realized the stakes were higher than just profit margins. His daughters were his litmus test. "Sarah, isn't it riskier to remain stagnant? What if we're losing touch with what makes us human?" His voice wavered, uncertainty still curling at the edges, yet a stubborn ember of advocacy fueled him. "Okay," she relented slowly. "I'll help you prepare. But if this flops, just remember, we can't afford to lose our footing." Her attempt at caution melted away under the conscious acknowledgement of a shared mission, and together they plotted a roadmap for the coffee shares. As the days progressed, Mark found himself navigating uncharted waters daily, his commitment deepening not just in the office, but at home. With each interaction at work, he noticed nuances in his daughters when he returned home. Their eyes twinkled with stories waiting to be told, and Mark began to nurture an environment where they felt safe sharing fears and dreams. He wanted their voices loud. The stories they crafted together became more important than ever. Friday mornings transformed into storytelling sessions, blending work and home like a seamless tapestry. His daughters recounted their days, laughter mingling with the unearthing of challenges. It wrapped him in a fabric of relief. Here, he was both father and innovator. Yet as Mark stepped into the next week, he faced the daunting prospect of the first official storytelling session at work. His heart raced, uncertainty threatening to choke his drive. Would his colleagues truly step away from their protective shells? Tension coiled in his stomach. He prepared for an inevitable clash with those unwilling to let go of the past. Memories of dismissive laughter resurfaced, battling against the fresh resolve he had been woven into. What if this effort only sheds light on old wounds, he pondered, grappling with the idea of vulnerability that was now a cornerstone of both his corporate vision and his home life. As the clock ticked toward the meeting time, Mark positioned himself at the front, feeling both the weight of expectation and the thin thread of hope. Could sharing these personal stories heal old rifts, or would familiarity reign supreme, solidifying the walls they had so meticulously constructed? It was a moment that could either solidify his new identity or fracture it further. The whirlpool of emotions churned violently within him. It was time to face entrenched resistance head-on, and as he opened the door to the conference hall, he wondered if he was ready to take a stand for not just himself, but for the very essence of connection he was yearning to create. The moment awaited, charged with possibility and fear. Would this be the tipping point that propelled him further into the life he envisioned, or the moment he realized he had miscalculated? Mark squared his shoulders as he stepped into the conference room. The air inside felt thick with expectancy, each face turned toward him a mirror of his own trepidation. This was the crossroads, the moment where his professional identity would either crystallize or shatter. He smiled, the gesture feeling both foreign and essential. "Thank you all for being here today." His voice broke slightly, revealing the tremor beneath his carefully constructed facade. He took a breath, grounding himself, reminding himself why he was here. Today is about sharing, about learning from each other's journeys. He launched into an anecdote about his daughters, recounting their struggles with vulnerability and the beauty that blossomed when they found their voices. The room quieted, and as he spoke, he watched their eyes shift from skepticism to curiosity. Perhaps, just perhaps, the stories might resonate. But then came the first wave of skepticism, epitomized in the glare of Jack, the company's lead strategist. "What's the point of this dribble, Mark? We're not here to swap feelings. We have performance metrics to hit." The challenge hung like a storm cloud, fueling Mark's own insecurities. He paused, a blur of doubt sweeping through him, but then he recalled the joy in his daughter's laughter and the shared moments that strengthened their bond. "Our work is built on relationships," he countered, passion igniting as he challenged himself to stay steady. "Are you saying the value of our connections is less important than numbers?" The ripple of tension cracked through the room, sparking murmurs among the team. There was a flicker of realization in several faces, though Jack remained staunch, unmoved by Mark's sentiment. "How can we connect better without knowing each other's stories? Isn't that critical to trust?" Mark pressed, emboldened by his own argument. He felt the adrenaline surge, igniting a fire beneath his skin. "We can't ignore the humanity behind our tasks. This is an opportunity to strengthen our collaboration." Eventually, he opened the floor. "I'd like to invite you all to share what brought you here, what motivates you." The silence stretched, deeper this time, the initial resistance a heavy blanket that began to loosen. A hesitant hand was raised. It belonged to Lisa from accounting. Her voice quaked with vulnerability as she divulged the challenges of balancing her career with caring for her aging mother. It was tender and raw, and Mark could see the collective walls among his colleagues beginning to crumble. One by one, people opened up. Stories flooded the room, weaving a tapestry of shared experience. Mark's heart raced with an intensity he hadn't anticipated. They were connecting, the air thickening with vulnerability, weaving a new fabric of camaraderie. But as the session gathered momentum, Mark felt the familiar edges of self-doubt creeping back. He glanced at Jack, who remained grim-faced, arms crossed defiantly. Would the tide truly turn, or had he merely unearthed deeper rifts? After an hour, as the heartfelt exchanges concluded, Mark felt a glimmer of hope. "Thank you for sharing. This," he gestured at the group, "is just the beginning." But as the room began to disperse, Jack cornered him, anger gnashing against the shimmering vulnerability of the moment. "You've overstepped, Mark. This isn't how we operate." Mark squared his jaw, determination surging through him once more. Despite having shared so openly, he understood he was not just battling an audience, he was clashing with old paradigms. "But what if this is exactly how we need to operate?" Future conversations and confrontations flashed behind his eyes. He felt on the brink of a profound transformation, not just of the company, but of his own essence. The seed of a new vision had taken root, but could he cultivate it amid the weeds of resistance? The question bristled in the air, and as the weight of challenges lay heavy on his shoulders, Mark knew this was only the beginning of a much larger journey of both his personal and professional evolution. Would he stand his ground against the old guard and risk it all, or would he retreat into the familiar shadows? The line had been drawn, and he was left to contemplate the consequences of each choice that lay before him. Mark sat alone in his office, the walls feeling like they were closing in on him. He replayed the confrontation with Jack over and over in his mind, scrutinizing every word exchanged. Was he right to venture into uncharted territory? As the daylight faded outside his window, a sense of isolation wrapped around him, prompting a wave of self-doubt. He leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes and inhaling deeply. The chaos of the meeting had left a lingering echo of disappointment, like a faint, unresolved chord. What if he had miscalculated? What if he had only succeeded in alienating Jack further? Mark began to sift through his thoughts, searching for a thread of clarity among the confusion. The essence of his daughter's stories sparked a flicker of resolve. They had taught him the importance of standing firm in one's beliefs. But this situation felt monumental, straddling the line between his personal convictions and the expectations of his professional environment. He needed a plan, a way to bridge that gap without losing himself. Shifting his focus from self-doubt to the future, Mark reached for his notepad. As he scribbled down ideas, he envisioned creating a series of workshops aimed at fostering connections within the company. He could see the potential, improving team dynamics, elevating morale, and ultimately boosting performance. Yet the specter of Jack's ire lingered in the back of his mind. The negativity he embodied felt so ingrained in the company's culture that it was hard to imagine change without conflict. Mark understood that to execute his vision, he would have to confront Jack directly again. But this time, he wouldn't be defensive. He would present his plan with clarity and confidence, backed by the stories already shared. He remembered Lisa's account of her challenges, how vulnerable she had been, yet how valued she emerged after her heartfelt revelation. If he could harness that power, perhaps he could chip away at the cold facade Jack presented. Mark let the idea marinate, aware that this confrontation wouldn't merely be a battle, a dance of ideas testing resilience against rigidity. After drafting his proposal, he felt a surge of empowerment. Each bullet point represented not just a strategy, but a personal commitment to build a workplace founded on understanding. The notion filled him with energy, transforming his apprehension into momentum. Mark envisioned presenting these workshops to the team, focusing on empathy as a competitive advantage. His thoughts drifted to moments of authenticity shared during the meeting, the sense of camaraderie born from vulnerability. If he could capture this spirit in a formal setting, it might transcend individual grievances. However, as he prepared to pitch this idea, the gnawing tension from facing Jack again loomed larger. Mark recognized he was not only fighting for a new direction within the company, but also confronting his own definition of leadership. This was the decisive moment that would test his resolve and clarity. Would he be courageous enough to embrace conflict as a catalyst for growth rather than a setback? That night at home, he discussed his thoughts with his wife, sharing his vision and the potential backlash. To his surprise, she offered insightful perspectives. You have to remember, Mark, not everyone is ready for change, but everyone responds to authenticity. Lead with your heart. As he lay in bed, her words echoed through his mind, mixing with the adrenaline still coursing through him. He realized that perhaps this journey was less about convincing others and more about embodying the change he wished to see. Resolved, he drifted to sleep with renewed focus. This conflict with Jack was inevitable, But what if it became an opportunity, a moment of truth that defined not only his path, but the path for others? The morning arrived with clarity. Mark prepared for the pitch, heart racing with a blend of anxiety and excitement. He knew the stakes were high, failure loomed large, yet so did the potential for a transformative victory. As he stood outside Jack's office, ready for that confrontation and the possible fallout, he couldn't help but wonder, would this moment catapult him toward a breakthrough or push him deeper into the shadows he had just begun to escape? The answer awaited him in the charged silence of the doorway. Mark stood at the threshold, the palpable tension pressuring against him like a heavy weight. The door to Jack's office loomed like a gate into an uncertain realm, pushing him to confront not only his adversary, but also the cracks in his own resolve. He took a deep breath, reminding himself that beyond this confrontation lay personal growth, not just for himself, but potentially for the entire company. With a determined stride, he knocked and entered. Jack looked up, his sardonic smile in stark contrast to the nervous energy crackling around Mark. The ambience was thick with unsaid words and hidden agendas. Mark felt the muscles in his torso tense as he settled into his role, not as a challenger, but as a collaborator, seeking to unearth the hidden potential buried beneath the rigid corporate structure. "Mark," Jack greeted, a hint of amusement flickering in his eyes. "To what do I owe this unexpected pleasure?" "Jack, I want to talk about the workshops I proposed," Mark began, steeling himself against the initial wave of doubt. He gestured toward the notepad carrying his carefully articulated plan. "I believe we can foster a more collaborative atmosphere, enhancing our team dynamics." Jack leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. "You really think a few workshops will change the ingrained culture around here? You're the new guy, Mark. You might want to temper your ambitions." The barb stung, igniting a swell of defiance within Mark. This was the moment to retreat into previous patterns of doubt or rise above. "It's about more than just workshops, Jack," he countered, voice steady. "It's about culture. People respond to vulnerability. I've seen the power of open communication firsthand." The challenge hung in the air, reminding Mark of the tangible moments from the meeting, the laughter, the tears, the humanity. He couldn't let Jack's cynicism snuff out that flame. This isn't merely an initiative, it's an opportunity for real change. Change that could help us innovate, grow, and ultimately drive performance. Jack's eyebrows lifted in amusement, but Mark noticed a flicker of intrigue beneath the skeptical facade. He pressed on, fueled by the stories his colleagues had bravely shared. Lisa spoke about how revealing her challenges fostered a stronger connection with the team. That authenticity can ignite empathy, turning our differences into strengths. Mark paused, trying to gauge Jack's reaction. The silence that followed felt thick, each second stretching into infinity as Jack contemplated his response. Mark's heart raced, knowing he had to press forward, but also aware that this moment could derail at any time. Finally, Jack leaned forward, breaking the tension that had coiled tightly between them. "What's your plan, really? You want to be the hero of the office? You're going to need more than inspirational quotes on the wall." Mark's pulse quickened with indignation, but he redirected his energy, determined to embrace Jack's skepticism as a challenge. "I want to be a guide, not a hero. I want to cultivate an environment where everyone feels heard and valued. It's about aligning our goals with a sense of purpose." As he spoke, Mark felt the words transform into a powerful mantra echoing in his mind, rekindling his belief that he was capable of provoking change, even among the staunchest of oppositions. Jack's expression hardened, yet his eyes flickered with something akin to interest. "Let's see the actual plan," Jack demanded, cutting through the tension. "But know this, I won't support fluff. I'm looking for metrics and results." The challenge ignited a spark within Mark. The concern that had once consumed him now morphed into a blueprint of determination. "Absolutely. I'll prepare a detailed outline that links our performance indicators to team engagement metrics. As he stepped back from that threshold, feeling the weight of possibility shift beneath his feet, Mark realized he had crossed into a new realm of self-assurance. He was no longer just an employee. He was a catalyst for change. Yet amid this moment of clarity, Mark couldn't shake off an unsettling thought. What if he was walking further into the lion's den? What cost would arise if he pushed Jack too far? With those questions swirling in his mind, Mark returned to his office, a glimmer of hope fighting against the uncertainty. The next steps would be crucial, but he was ready to engage in the very conflict he had once feared. The battle had begun, but the outcome remained painfully uncertain. What awaited him next? Would he sustain his newfound confidence, or would the weight of the looming conflict crush his spirit? The path ahead lay strewn with challenges, and he felt the compelling urge to delve deeper into the unknown. Mark spent the next few days in intense preparation, channeling the uncertainty that clung to him into focused action. Each morning, he arrived early at the office, coffee in hand, poring over data and sharpening his proposal. He dissected performance metrics, correlated them with team dynamics, and contemplated the integration of emotional intelligence into the corporate culture. But behind his diligent work ethic lay an undercurrent of trepidation. How would Jack react when faced with the specifics? Every interaction felt like a test of his resolve. In meetings, his mind raced with ideas, but felt the pressure of Jack's critical eyes bearing down on him. The tension was palpable. It seemed as though every minor discussion could shift the trajectory of his nascent initiative. Yet amid the turmoil, Mark discovered a strange kind of clarity. The more he leaned into the uneasy conversations, the more adept he became at articulating his vision. Each encounter, fraught as it was with potential rejection, reinforced his commitment to the task at hand. By the end of the week, he had crafted a presentation that outlined his initiative astutely. He included case studies from comparable enterprises, pinpointed how fostering an open culture had increased productivity and morale elsewhere. It was a masterpiece of strategy and hope, a bridge connecting theory with actionable insights. Taking a deep breath, he approached Jack's office again, the weight of his anxious pulse steadying. This time, he wouldn't simply surrender to entertainment. He would assert his knowledge with confidence. The stakes were rising, and Mark could feel the electric pulse of urgency at his fingertips. As he knocked and entered, Jack's usual apathy seemed momentarily replaced by curiosity. "You're back," Jack said, his voice laced with an edge of expectation. "Let's see what you've got." Mark laid out his proposal with precision, watching Jack's expression morph from mild interest to focused anticipation as he navigated through each slide. The robust data, paired with personal anecdotes from Lisa and others, painted an enthralling picture of potential transformation within their walls. "Engagement metrics will reflect the climate we create," Mark pronounced, ensuring his conviction reverberated through the room. "A more open culture will drive innovation, which ultimately leads to higher profitability." Jack leaned back, a slight frown creasing his forehead. "All this sounds good, but you need to recognize the fine line between ambition and naivete," he warned, his eyes narrowing. "You think you can flip a switch and get results? People don't change overnight." Mark's stomach twisted. It would be easy to crumble under Jack's questioning, but he forced himself to maintain a calm exterior, the passion simmering just behind the surface. "I understand it takes time, but we begin with small steps. Workshops cannot be underestimated. They are the bedrock of trust. From that foundation, we build culture." A silence fell, stretching taut between them. Mark held his breath, feeling the weight of Jack's skepticism settle like a lead blanket. But as seconds ticked by, he saw a flicker of thought pass behind Jack's eyes, a glimmer of potential openness. "Okay," Jack finally said, a note of begrudging respect in his tone. "I'll let you run a pilot workshop. One session, measurable outcomes, or it's done. Mark nodded, exhilaration coursing through him. He turned to exit, but then looked back, his voice steady yet imbued with warmth. Thank you, Jack. This is a pivotal moment for us. Back in his office, the thrill of victory washed over him. Yet beneath the excitement lay a deepened anxiety. The success of this pilot workshop loomed as a mountain he'd have to scale meticulously. Would his colleagues respond well? Would Jack's guarded nature persist in undermining their success? As he began drafting plans for the workshop, Mark knew this was not merely about professional growth. It was about confronting the deeper, often conflicting threads of self-doubt and ambition intertwined within him. The path ahead was illuminated, but the terrain remained perilously unpredictable. What challenges would arise in the days leading up to the workshop? Would he be able to galvanize his colleagues to embrace this change, or would the very culture he aimed to improve push back with equal vigor? The tension felt palpable, and as the clock ticked down to the workshop's launch, Mark could only brace for the impending storm. As the days slipped by, Mark delved into the nitty-gritty of workshop preparation. Each detail felt like a thread in a tapestry that, if woven together correctly, could inspire immediate change amongst his colleagues. He drafted agendas, compiled participant materials, and envisioned the reactions of those who would attend. There was an exhilarating energy coursing through him as he planned exercises intended to foster trust and collaboration. Yet lurking beneath that fervor was a nagging doubt. What if his vision was too ambitious? He sought feedback from Lisa, the office's go-to for HR insights. Over coffee in the break room, her expression shifted from amusement to concern as he explained his hopes for the workshop. Mark, the idea is fantastic, but don't underestimate the resistance you might face, she cautioned. You're trying to shift mindsets that have been years in the making. Mark nodded, absorbing her insights while fighting the instinct to be defensive. Could he truly catalyze change? Would these methodologies take root amid steadfast adherence to traditional practices? Let's think strategically, he suggested, trying to keep the conversation focused. What if we emphasize small wins, showcase stories of previous successes? Lisa considered this, tapping her lips in thought. That could resonate. People need to feel that evolution is achievable, not just a corporate buzzword. This conversation, brief but illuminating, absorbed into Mark's psyche. He realized that while he could navigate the waters of analytical data and strategic corporate initiatives, addressing the emotional landscape of his colleagues required a different skill set. He would need to be both a visionary and a motivator, balancing the data-driven approach with genuine empathy. By the time he finalized the workshop's agenda, he felt a knot in his stomach tighten. As eagerly as he wanted to engage his colleagues with fresh ideas, he also dreaded their possible cynicism, the familiar reluctance that had stifled innovation before. On the eve of the pilot workshop, Mark lingered in his office, scanning through the plethora of preparation notes. He couldn't shake the fear of disappointing not only Jack, but also those whose lives he wanted to impact. The specter of failure loomed larger than the excitement of potential success. Would colleagues see it as a genuine opportunity, or merely another hollow attempt at superficial change? Each glance at the clock felt like a countdown, an impending storm that threatened to sweep away everything he worked hard to build. He recalled Jack's stern warnings about people not changing overnight. Perhaps he should have aligned his expectations more closely with that reality. It was easy to see the beauty of his proposal, much harder to envision how it would be received, dissected and challenged in the harsh light of the office. With night giving way to morning, Mark rose early, his heart pounding with determination. The groundwork had been laid. Now it was time to execute. He gathered his notes and headed to the conference room, steeling himself for the day ahead. Each step echoed a question. Was he truly prepared to lead a workshop that could reshape their corporate culture? When colleagues began to filter in, Mark noticed their mixed expressions, some intrigued, others skeptical. He stood before them, a palpable tension igniting the air. This was his moment. Could he inspire belief among the resistant, ignite a spark of openness in deeply entrenched behaviors? "Thank you all for being here," Mark began, his voice steady despite the tremors within. "Today isn't just about a new initiative, it's about each of us, how we show up, connect, and grow alongside one another." The eyes before him shifted, gauging his sincerity as they settled on his words. Suddenly, he realized he wasn't just leading a workshop, he was inviting them on a journey, an expedition through not only corporate strategies but personal and collective aspirations. This wasn't merely a presentation for approval, it was the first step of a deeper engagement he had been yearning for. With every slide he presented, every activity they engaged in, Mark sensed both excitement and resistance clashing in the room. The stakes had shifted from professional ambitions to a nuanced exploration of significance within workplace relationships. And that is when he noticed a familiar face. Brandon, typically dismissive and cynical, leaned forward, his body language intrigued. Mark's heart raced. Could this be the catalyst he had been searching for? "Let's face the core of our culture today," Mark declared, locking eyes with Brandon and the others as he aimed for an honest connection. "It's time for us to redefine what it means to work together." A ripple of curiosity passed through the group, a subtle yet profound shift. Could this really be the breakthrough he so desperately desired? As the session unfolded, Mark sensed momentum building, but also sensed looming challenges. Would he be able to transform that initial spark into a sustained flame? As the morning progressed, unscripted tensions began to surface. A critical question from an unexpected participant sent him spiraling into a moment of vulnerability. Mark could feel the intensity rising, and he steeled himself against the throes of potential backlash. The moment of truth loomed just ahead. Would he rise to the occasion, or would the doubts stemming from the atmosphere extinguish things before they truly ignited? Deep inside, he knew one thing. This was just the beginning of a journey far more complex than he had ever envisioned. At the end of the workshop, Mark stood in the conference room, absorbing the whirlwind of discussion that had erupted from his initial presentation. The diverse reactions swirled around him, a far cry from the looming stiffness that had greeted him at the start. He had seen eyes spark with interest during storytelling sessions, heard hesitant laughter break through the tension, and felt the bonds of connection begin to unfurl. Yet, even amid this growth, uncertainty clawed at him. As he concluded the session, a wave of adrenaline surged through his veins, fueled by raw vulnerability and palpable energy from the participants. Change requires courage, and today we took our first important steps toward redefining our culture. His words resonated, igniting a ripple of affirmative nods. Mark could feel the shift, a seismic transformation taking root, even as he braced himself for potential backlash from Jack. Doubt loomed, but so did resolve. This workshop hadn't merely been an experiment, it had sparked something deeper, a realization within Mark that authenticity could serve as a transformational force. The days that followed marked a pivotal transition for Mark and his colleagues. The feedback from the pilot workshop had been overwhelmingly positive, and even Jack had begrudgingly acknowledged the session's impact. The metrics of connection and engagement began to reflect the ethos Mark had envisioned. His colleagues shared stories, embraced vulnerability, and committed to a culture of authenticity. They eagerly participated in follow-up sessions that echoed the community spirit he had implored them to participate in. Mark marveled at how his colleagues transformed before his eyes. The enthusiasm of Lisa as she spoke about the potential of collaboration inspired him. The engagement metrics climbed higher month by month. Conversations shifted. Team meetings became landscapes of innovation rather than obligatory tasks. Meetings hummed with collaborative energy as departments began sharing insights, leading to increased synergy across the company. Fueled by this newfound drive, Mark established a series of monthly team-building meetings, gatherings where stories were shared over coffee, where creative spirits blossomed, and where employees took pride in both their achievements and their shared experiences. Through this evolution, Mark tapped into a wellspring of emotional intelligence that he had been reluctant to engage. It wasn't just the company culture that transformed. His own sense of identity morphed into a tapestry of fulfillment. One evening, during a casual dinner at home, Mark noticed Emma and Lily sitting by the fireplace, glimmers of joy dancing in their eyes as they shared stories inspired by their mother's journal. This was a stark contrast to the sleepless nights they had endured together. Together they realized the power of shared narratives, how storytelling soothed their emotional burdens. "Dad," Lily said, her voice bright with pride, "I watched you today. You changed everything, didn't you?" Mark smiled, filled with a swell of hope and contemplation. "We're all learning how to change together, baby, just like we learned from your mother." He was home now, fully present. In the office, Jack recognized Mark's impact when he received accolades during a quarterly review. "Mark," he announced, promoting him to a senior leadership position, "your approach has not only improved engagement, but has made a tangible difference in our performance metrics. I didn't believe it was possible. Now you've proven it." The validation washed over Mark like sunlight, illuminating the path he had carved. It represented not just professional achievement, but a metamorphosis of character, a full-circle journey from corporate survival to heartfelt flourishing. Reflecting on the past months, he acknowledged how vulnerabilities had borne resilience. Every confrontation, every fearful tumult within different spheres of life had become the waters through which he learned to swim. He had embraced the strength beneath his sorrow, discovering a lighthouse amid the darkness. Mark Jensen had emerged not just as a corporate leader, but an advocate for reconnection, his daughters now sleeping soundly, and his workplace blossoming through the connective power of storytelling. What began as a struggle culminated in profound achievement, solidifying the belief that authenticity and vulnerability are potent catalysts in both professional life and family. As he gazed at Emma and Lily laughing heartily, he realized they had all contributed to rebuilding what had been lost. Their shared narrative served as the bedrock for a new legacy, one littered with strength, compassion, and love forged through adversity. The journey had taught him an invaluable lesson. True success isn't measured solely by metrics, but by the relationships that endure and uplift, the heartbeats that echo through every shared story, each rewarding moment of connection that binds us in the tapestry of life. Now, it's your turn. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Your support makes a difference. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second. Your engagement empowers more inspiring stories.